In the summer of 1902, a new hotel opened in the White Mountains. Grand in size, grand in accommodations, grand in its setting. The Mount Washington Hotel was 460 feet long with 350 guest rooms. There was a 230-foot-long main lobby and a 900-foot-long veranda. The basement housed New Hampshire's first indoor swimming pool. The Mount Washington Hotel was, and still is, the largest wooden structure ever built in New Hampshire. The grand hotels of the White Mountains were standard for resorts of their day. They had their own resident orchestras, their own resident artists. They kept up with the latest inventions. They had their own newspaper, Among the Clouds, printed daily from the top of Mount Washington. While advising of special events, it also published the names of people checking into the region's hotels each day. Some hotels maintained their own farms to provide guests fresh dairy products and produce. And what could be grown could easily be imported, quickly and fresh, from Boston or Portland.
Food, you couldn't believe. I think they just changed clothes and ate all day long. They shot skeet, they played, they went for horseback rides, they listened to music, they danced, they played. These were people who had nothing but money and time, and they had to use both.
You've got to do something better than somebody else. And we thought our hospitality at the hotel was terrific. We also tried to create a snob appeal. Oh, definitely. We really worked at that.
People were very concerned about going to resorts and having an opportunity to perform on the social scene. And in that regard, the hotel stage sets for the ritual of vacationing.
Guests came expecting to be seen by other guests. They would promenade on the veranda, put on formal dress for dinner, and then promenade on the veranda again. The hotels put their biggest into their public areas, the dining hall, the music room, the lobby, the ballroom.
Public rooms are immense, luxurious, whereas the private rooms are, they're okay. They're small sometimes, they're not very luxurious. That's purposeful because in the 19th century, you used your private room almost entirely as a kind of staging place for your presentation of yourself, just to dress, to sleep, and to check out into the public rooms. So you would be there the minimum amount of time, and it was the place where you would prepare yourself for the real life of the vacation.
Visually linked to the White Mountain landscape, the grand hotels were in fact separate from the communities where they were located. For those who grew up, the hotels were off limits.
It was the place on the hill that you couldn't go to, but it was the place if your aunt came from Texas or your friend came from school. Number 1 or 2 on your list of things to do when you took them around the area was to drive by the Mount Washington, to pull off and to take a picture.
The hotels always made a pretty picture, but their impact on the local community was not always welcome, as in 1929, when a dam broke at the Balsams, sending a wall of water 8 miles down the valley and washing out the town of Colebrook.
The original wells were owned by people in New Hampshire. They employed people who weren't from New Hampshire, the seasonal Florida staff. They catered to people who weren't from New Hampshire. They didn't do very much for the people of New Hampshire.
The hotels provided seasonal work, but few of the hundreds of jobs went to local residents. The professional staff would follow the hotel circuit, working in Florida hotels during the winter and New Hampshire hotels during the summer. Other positions might be filled by direct applications to the hotels or through Boston employment agencies. Once hired, the staff sees, but in less grand accommodations, and the watchful eye of their ears.
When she hired the girls, she told them, these are the rules. And one of our rules is that at 9 o'clock you're going to be inside your dormitory and I'm locking the door. And if you're not working there any longer.
June June 17, 1909, Mary Burns of Boston began work as a starcher in the laundry at the Crawford House. Referred by Jordan's employment agency on Boylston Street in Boston, Burns earned $25 a month. $2.50 of her first month's wage went to the employment agency. Cara and Margaret Fletcher, sisters from Grafton, Massachusetts, were waitresses in the dining room and were paid $2.50 a week. B.L. Pinney was the head waiter. His wife put up that summer. Her accommodations were subtracted from his final paycheck. G.A. Kimball worked as a cashier for $100 a month. The cash drawer was $5 short on August 20th. That amount was subtracted from Kimball's paycheck. Joseph Smith worked as a broiler from June 26th until October 4th. According to records, he was ugly. The grand hotels of the White Mountains reached their zenith in the early years of the 20th century. Their growth had paralleled the growth of the railroads. Their decline would follow the railroad's decline as well.
The customary thing with a great resort is to take a train up there and to stay for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, and then go home. What automobiles allowed people to do is to take the car and roam around. So they might still go to the great hotel, but they probably wouldn't stay as long.
Automobiles changed the way people viewed vacation travel. Destination became less important as the act of motoring became the vacation. The first automobiles were the domain of the wealthy. Of necessity, hotels accommodated them, but did not let them disrupt long-held traditions.
In the very early days, the main entrance, the porte cochere, was reserved for folks who came by carriage. So only the horses and their carriages got an opportunity to come to the porte cochere. And some of the early photographs showed that the automobile entrance was on the end of the hotel.
The automobiles responded to the desire for many wealthy tourists to have more privacy in their vacation, to be more separate from the social world that they might encounter at the resort. Because what happens is, at the great resorts at the turn of the century, very wealthy people were beginning to express doubts about the social qualities of the people they were meeting there. They were not as certain as they once might have been that they were meeting the right kinds of people, or that more important, that their kids were meeting the right kinds of people there.
My mom on the jump. He said, "The Profile House is on fire. Let's go."
Of the approximately 31 grand hotels built in the White Mountains, 18 were eventually destroyed by fire. In their heyday, the owners would simply rebuild, usually on the same spot and in just months. But as new travel habits of the 20th century took their toll, hotels became less profitable.
The whole front of the building, when we got there, was gone. But it was these wings that the flames were shooting sky high. They were just going, and the wind was blowing it and accentuating this situation so that it was just out of hand.
The Profile House never rebuilt and never opened again. When its complex of buildings was destroyed by fire in 1923, the owner decided to sell. But this was not just a piece of property with a burned-out foundation. The Profile House owned the entire Franconia Notch, including the Flume, Profile Lake, and the Old Man of the Mountain.
In an interesting, curious way, the hotel industry, the movement to preserve the forest lands of northern New Hampshire.
And many of these very wealthy people who are staying in a grand hotel and look out on their porch, out from their piazza, if you will, in their rocking chair, and they see a lumber company absolutely clear-cutting the side of a mountain all the way to the peak, and seeing forest fires occurring in the burning this and burning that, being their landscape.
But then the Depression occurred, and some people felt guilty about coming to a place like this, even if they could afford it. Many people could no longer afford it.
This was the circular driveway coming into the main entrance of the hotel. And right here Right here was the main entrance. And the Crawford House had 145 rooms, not counting, you never counted employees.
One by one, the White Mountain Grand Hotels began to disappear. Sometimes it was fire. More often, it was slow, gradual decay, the financial reality of a declining era.
You cannot operate a place like this with declining values, with declining standards, with declining measurements of hospitality. If you do that, you will decline.
The expense of operating that hotel, even though we tried to keep it down, was mounting very rapidly. Whereas the gross sales couldn't go much higher. We had a whale of a business.
The Dodge family had owned Mountain View House in Whitefield since 1866. In 1979, Schuyler Dodge, fourth generation of his family to own the hotel, decided it was time to sell.
Have you seen the Mountain View today?
Want to cry? That's a place to do it. Just standing there with the windows out of it.
The Mountain View House closed in 1986, and its contents were auctioned off. Today, the views are just as spectacular, but the paint on the front porch has lost its luster. Like a shoe long in dry dock, the house sits empty and abandoned.
And it was a grand old lady. Very snotty old lady. And she was proud, very proud. And proud of her guests, proud of her employees. It was terrific.
Okay, tonight's hot appetizer, we have the fresh New England popover with the white wine cheese fondue. That's the white wine, kirsch, cherry liqueur, grated Swiss cheese, the sweet pickle chips that we make here, and a little chopped parsley and pink peppercorns.
Though most of the hotels are gone, there are a few survivors. There is the Balsams in Dixville Notch. There is the Eagle Mountain House, and in Bretton Woods, there's the Mount Washington Hotel.
People come here because it is unique, because they want to touch the history. They do want to dine in the same grandeur that that Vladimir Horowitz did when he came here. Baby Grand in the conservatory, their sherry.
No longer exclusively a summer operation, the Grand Hotels of today serve a year-round clientele. They have adapted to new trends of recreation, snowshoeing, and fall foliage.
The Balsams is very successful, but it still is a very fragile entity. And if the intent of my partners and myself was to parlay our success here, take the profits from this company and spend it somewhere else, the Balsams would not survive. And our intention from the start has been not to do this so that we get a better job somewhere else. We actually want to live in Dixville Notch.
Unlike the past, the Balsams and the Mount Washington are locally owned. They are particular communities. They welcome people, whether wealthy travelers expecting to stay the summer or local residents in for a special lunch.
We have done everything that we can to let the local people know that this hotel is owned by their neighbors and that they, as well as their neighbors, are welcome to come. It took a long time for people to realize that they could drive up that drive and that they wouldn't get shocked by something, that there wasn't something that would happen to them.
Here they serve hospitality in a grand fashion. It is hospitality that has deep roots and a long tradition. The guests no longer come by train, but they still play golf and tennis. They still go for hikes and swim, and they still expect the best for dinner.
Our staff is who operates and owns this hotel. They take a personal interest. They treat guests like it is their own home. They honestly do. And we intend to be here as long as we have the staff that feels that way.